right, we're going to get going. So first of all, before we get into the meat of things, tell us a little bit about where you grew up and brothers, sisters, parents. Give us a little flavor of Little Carla.
Okay, absolutely. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, so for the record, I was born in Port Arthur, Texas. Most of the time I say I'm from Jacksonville because my family moved there when I was 8 going on 9, so the rest of elementary school, junior high school was all in Jacksonville. My mother was an educator who became a dean of students, and my father was the captain of a commercial fishing vessel. And as I tell people all the time, I grew up in a no excuses household. They would never let me make excuses about anything. So I couldn't say, oh, the teacher didn't give me this grade because she didn't like me, or this or that. They would, what did you do? She didn't like you, so what did you do? Right? And so it was always me, and I had responsibility for things. So it made me grow up taking responsibility for my own failure, my own success. And they always challenged me. And I think the most important thing that I remember about my childhood is they always made me feel that I was supposed to do well. They never made me feel like it was special or that I was different from anybody else. You're like everybody else, and you're smart, and you better get A's. And the story I love to tell is that I came home one day with my dad, and I said, Daddy, you owe me some money. And he said, why do I owe you money? I said, because I made A's, and so-and-so's mama gave them 50 cents for every A, and so-and-so's daddy gave them $1 for every A, so you owe me some money. And he said, I owe you nothing. See what happens if you don't get them A's. That didn't work. Wait a minute. So, but again, it made me feel that I was supposed to do well, and there was nothing special about making an A. So that's what I did.
How many brothers and sisters?
I was the only child of my parents' union. Now, I do have a couple of brothers because, you know, Papa was a road. I do have a couple of brothers from before my parents got married, but I was the only child of the union.
So we had Melody Hobson, which you know, here a few years ago. So when did you know you were just, I know your parents made you feel like you were supposed to do well, but when did you know you were just a little bit different and there was something out of life that you were going to get or make happen, maybe where all the other kids may not?
You know, I have to tell you, I never felt that I was different. I never felt that I was different. I actually, and to this day, still feel that everybody has the same opportunity. It's about the decision that you make, right? And my mother always said, you know, Carla, we are a product of our choices. Be careful of your choice. And even last week, I was speaking to a group of Morgan Stanley interns. A couple of them, only a couple looked like us, and the others didn't. And you should have seen, I could tell when that aha moment happened when I said this. Remember that every moment you have a choice. Every moment. You can choose this way or you can choose that way. That is your power. So the question is, what choice are you going to make? And so I never felt that I was different than any other kids. I was just making the choices that I had available. Now, again, my parents and my paternal grandmother in particular always encouraged me to go for the best, whatever the best was. And my mother used to say all the time, you know, Carla, the world is not fair. So whatever, if you want an A, go for the A+. That way, if they shave you a little bit, you still have an A. And that was her way of telling me about the inequities in the world. I look back now, and she was trying to tell me that there was racism in the world, there was discrimination in the world. I didn't get that then. I just knew go for the A+ because I got shaved, I still have my A.
Okay, so you go to high school, is your high school mixed, predominantly one, and then you go from high school to you're a little different at some point.
Okay, all right, come on. So, no, let me tell you how the Harvard thing happened. So I went to a Catholic school. I've gone to Catholic school all my life, kindergarten, 12th grade. And I always knew I was going to go to college because my parents told me I was going to go to college. But nobody ever said, go for the Ivy League or go for this school. My aspiration was to go to UCLA. Why? Because my favorite aunt lived in Los Angeles. That was it. And so I wanted to go where my nanny lived. And, but I went to a really great Catholic school, and I was in honors classes. And all of my classmates were talking about University of Pennsylvania and Harvard and Cornell and Yale. And can I tell you, none of those schools, with the exception of Harvard, had ever crossed my mind. I didn't know about any of them. My uncle, who was a pharmacist, used to always say, you're going to go to Harvard because you're going to be a lawyer. Because I think Harvard Law School was the only law school he knew. So he kept saying, you're going to be a lawyer. You're going to Harvard Law School. So that's why I heard the word Harvard. And what made me actually apply is what you should know about me is that I'm negatively motivated. So when you tell me I can't do something, I'm all over like Smith, right? And I went my junior year and I said to the guidance counselor, I'd like to see the information on Cornell and Yale, only because I heard the kids in my arts classes talking about that. And he said to me, don't worry about applying to any of those schools. They're very difficult to get in. You'll go to college, don't worry. And I said, well, wait a minute. Well, why not? He said, those schools are very, very competitive. 1 in 10 gets in. Don't worry about that. Just apply to the Florida schools. You'll be fine. You'll get into a college. And again, as I was teasing some of your colleagues, that was my Scooby moment. So, being the good little Catholic girl that I am, I applied to all the schools he told me to apply to, but I applied to all the ones that I wanted to apply to. And by then, I had a few Ivy League schools on my list because, again, the kids who were in my honors classes, they were, hey, did you apply to Harvard? Have you heard back from University of Pennsylvania? They were talking among themselves. Mind you, nobody's talking to me. All right, my colleagues are not including me in this conversation. So I applied, and I got into every school that I applied. What I say to kids today and what I say to adults, never count yourself out. And for Pete's sake, don't let somebody else count you out. Because if I had not applied, I would have had a markedly different outcome. Now, if it was my divine destiny to get to Wall Street, I would have eventually gotten there anyway. However, my path would have been very different. And I'm not sure I would have acquired the same skill set, the same tools, and the same intellect had I taken another route. But that guy told me point blank not to apply. So that, again, I don't think I'm any different than anybody else. Anybody could have applied, but because he told me not to, that's what made me apply.
Everybody trying to figure out, like, hey, what am I about to go? Somebody told me not to do this.
That's right. Try anyway. You lose nothing. And I would argue that the act of trying gives you something. And as I tell everybody, go for it because you're going to get one or two things. You'll get the blessing or the lesson. And the blessing is achieving that which you were trying to do. And the lesson is that now you know how to do it differently. So even if you didn't get it, the fact that you tried gave you some information. And information, as we know, is power.
I feel like we can go home already. Okay, so when did you realize that you first wanted a career in finance? Like, how did that come about? And tell us a little bit about your career trajectory.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, once again, I didn't know anything about finance. You know, I would faintly hear on the evening news the Dow Jones is blah, but I didn't know what the Dow Jones was. And the summer after my freshman year, a bunch of my friends went to this program called SEO, and it exists today. And if you have kids in your life that might be interested in finance, tell them to look at SEO, Sponsors for Educational Opportunity. And it started as a high school program, a high school enrichment program, and today they give 700 extra hours of enrichment during high school to make sure that kids do well on their SATs and then make sure they can go to good colleges. But the summer of '81, they started this program called the Career Management Program, specifically for the purpose of introducing Wall Street to talented kids of color and talented kids of color to Wall Street in hopes that there would be a marriage made for when these kids graduated, they could go into this newly created analyst program. So Wall Street created this program in 1980 as a response to the top 5 business schools saying, we're not going to take people straight in from undergrad. We want people to have 2 years of work experience. So of course Wall Street responded and created these analyst programs for you to come in after graduation, work for 2 years, and then they kick you out, and you go on to graduate school and do whatever you want. And oh, by the way, these are really, really great paying jobs for 22-year-olds, right? Now the going rate is about $150,000 a year. If you get, that's right, if you get one of these analyst jobs on Wall Street. So the genius of Mike Oshowitz, the guy who started SEL, said, let me see if we can get some kids in only in their junior year. So if they like them that junior summer as they're rising seniors, then they might hire them when they graduate. Sure enough, it worked. So I still credit SEO with changing the face of Wall Street. There's still not a lot of people who look like you and me on Wall Street, but they single-handedly have put most of the people that have gone through the street through this program. So after my freshman year, more enlightened students than I was at the time did this program. They came back just raving about it. And I said, hey, well then I'm going to try it. Now I had never, ever really left Jacksonville, Florida outside of that I-10 corridor between Port Arthur, Texas and Jacksonville. So I had been nowhere in the Northeast. But I decided I was going to apply. And again, God takes care of fools and babies. I had no idea what a stress interview was. And they had 3 people interviewing me at the same time. That's a stress interview. But I didn't know, so I was just sitting there, being Carla. And got the job as a sophomore. Right? So and right after my sophomore year. And again, my negative motivation kicked in because I did not see a lot of people on Wall Street that summer that looked like me. And I realized all of a sudden that I liked this thing because you needed analytical and quantitative skills, and I was pretty good at math. And so the fact that I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me, and I could use my economics degree, I thought this might be an interesting thing to do. And it really, I got the bug at that point because I realized that the things that were attracting me to a career in the law, number 1, I wanted to call the shots. Number 2, I wanted to have a lot of responsibility early on. And number 3, I wanted to make a lot of money. So I realized that summer at Wall Street that it wasn't the lawyers that called the shots, it's the business people that call the shots, and the lawyers help you get it done within the context of the law. Number 2, I could have a lot of responsibility because there I was, 19 years old, doing analysis that people were using to make decisions to issue hundreds of billions of dollars of bonds at the city level because I was doing public finance. And number 3, I realized I could make a lot of money. So I said, all right, I'm going to do that thing. And that was all she wrote.
That was a nice earring.
Thank you.
Okay, so you are a female of color in an old, white male-dominated field of finance. What's been some of your biggest challenges in trying to navigate and succeeding in that world?
Yeah, the biggest challenges, frankly, were not knowing the things that I wrote about in my first book, Expect to Win. Because in our communities, we are taught to, if you're really smart and you work hard, you can go straight to the top. But nobody talks to you about the importance of relationships. That's right. And really making sure that you have somebody in the room to speak for you, which means you have to extend yourself. And we are taught actually, to keep things in it. You tell Miss so-and-so about what's going on in this household, right? So we're just socialized not to share like that. The other thing is that we generally have trust issues. Can I get an amen? Amen. So the first time somebody does something to you, especially somebody that doesn't look like you, you're willing to shut down. Yeah. And it's in fact that very part of you that you should be extending with someone else that will make people trust you, make people want to build a relationship with you. So it wasn't understanding those things more than it was anything else that created the challenge. And if you had asked me, if you had said to me, Carla, you're going to have some challenges as a woman of color, I would have thought that it was because of my tan, not because of my plumbing. And in fact, there are more people that had issues with women, which I, growing up in the South, you don't experience that. You experience, the issues around race, but not so much around gender. But I really had no challenges that I would argue that were insurmountable outside of my not knowing the game and my not having the language to be able to navigate in those environments.
So tell us about one of the memorable experiences during your career that was a big turning point or like a lesson learned.
Yeah, it's the one I talk about all the time that I wrote about in Expect to Win. It's chapter 4. Perception is the co-pilot to reality. How people perceive you will directly impact how they deal with you. And the story that I love to tell is I had a very senior managing director who said to me one day, you know, you're smart, you work hard, but I don't think you're tough enough for this business. And as I like to say, my first reaction was, what is he smoking? You can call Carla Harris a lot of things, but ain't tough ain't one of them. Then I said, well, wait a minute, suppose he's not pulling my leg. Suppose he really doesn't think that I'm tough enough for this business. And heaven forbid, suppose the rest of the organization doesn't think that I'm tough enough for this business. And as you can imagine, the last thing that you want to be thought of as a woman, and a woman on Wall Street, is not tough. So after I got that feedback, I said, okay, I know what I'll do. I decided I was going to walk tough, talk tough, eat tough, breathe tough, use tough in my language. Because it's important that if you want to train people to think about you in a certain way, you must have consistent behavior around the adjectives that they value. So the adjectives have to be consistent with how they define success. And clearly tough was one of them. So I had a reputation of being very good at critiquing management presentations. So much so that before we would take a company on the road for a multi-billion-dollar IPO or a multi-hundred-million-dollar common stock transaction, my colleagues would often ask me, come into the room, listen to that CEO's presentation, give that CEO some feedback, even when it wasn't my deal. So the next time someone asked me to do that, after I had gotten that feedback, I said, wait a minute, tell me a little bit about this CEO. Is this guy sensitive? Does he have a thin skin? I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings because you know I'm tough. And sure enough, in about 90 days, I had a team of people coming to see me. They didn't know I was behind them. The VP was beating up the core associate. Do you have the backup analysis? Do you have the synergy analysis? We're going to see Carla Harris, and you know she's so tough. So they will start to think of you that way. And the reason I talk about that is the point that I'm really trying to make is that you have the power to train people to think about you in the way that you want them to think about you. And the way that you want them to think about you has to be consistent with what's valued in that role, right? So if you are a journalist, what people are going to value is your relationship building skills, your writing skills, your communication skills. So when you're talking about yourself in that environment, you need to say things like, oh, I'm happy to go out and meet so-and-so. You know I have great relationship building skills. I'll get him to talk to me. Or let me go do so-and-so. Let me put that together because I have great relationship building skills. It's funny. The more you say that in your environment, when you're talking about yourself, when you are not in the room, they will describe you that way. And that's how you want it to work when you're trying to change the way people are thinking about you.
That's powerful. So when I was a mayor for the 8-year period, you know, I'd go around the country and go to different communities, especially urban inner city areas. And this notion of poverty and wealth creation, or lack of wealth creation, debt, it was just prevalent everywhere. So I guess the question for you, when you start thinking about how we as a community can look at wealth creation, intergenerational wealth, and passing it on, what advice do you have, you know, to our audience when it comes to money and trying to get ahead and maybe changing the whole paradigm?
Yes, there's a lot of things that I can say. The first thing that I'll say is understand your relationship with money, right? We don't really understand the relationship that we have with money. Some of us came from environments where there really wasn't any money. So if you think about it, we don't respect it in the same way, and we certainly don't look at it as something that could generate more wealth, right? We look at it as a means to, you know, to do whatever we need to do. The other thing that I would say is understand the difference between your needs and your wants. That's a big issue for us. Because there's a lot of things that we say, I need certain, so, you know, and at the end of the day, you don't need another pair of shoes. You might want another pair of shoes. But again, you got to think about that. You know, red bottom shoes are nice to have and you might aspire, but those things are $850 plus. And they hurt your feet. Really?
More Jordans.
Or Jordans, for example. I mean, you know that we do that because our kids want it and we feel good about being able to provide it, and everybody else in school has a pair. We can't possibly have our kids not have a pair, but that's $250. People tell me all the time, you know, I can't really save, right? I said, really? Okay, how many Starbucks do you have a day? Oh, girl, I have to have my 3 because I got to have my coffee in the morning. My coffee. Now, mind you, the office gives you the Keurig. Amen, somebody. Amen. Whichever one, right? But I said, give up one. Because a venti is like $6, right? Okay, so let's just do some quick math. If you do that every day, you give up that one, at the end of the week, you got $30, right? Now, you do that times 4, right? You have $120. You do that times 12, you have $1,440. Most mutual funds, you can start with $1,000, right? So there's all kinds of ways to save and do the math and think about it. There are lots of ways. We think about what we might put on credit cards, for example, and unless you are very aggressive about negotiating your credit card rate, and it can be done, but most of us don't take the time to call, you're paying 18, 20, in some cases 30%, you know, and if you want to just get started, start easily. What I tell people, 10% to the Lord, 10% for yourself. Try to do something like 40, 50% on the bills, and then you got a little extra that you really can't save. Or if there's that must-have thing, then okay, buy a little bit, but at least you have saved first, right? But you have to start somewhere. It's the saving. You can't invest if you don't save. And then another thing that we do is we're so quick, so we have school loans. Okay, people are acting like school loans. Now, the first time I ever heard of college loans, we had debt, right? Now, mind you, the debt wasn't as much as it is now, but we still had debt. It was all relative, right? Because $30,000 meant something different in '84 than it means right now, right? And I was making 30, and okay, so I didn't have the debt that these kids, but I had a 6-figure debt, but methodically paid that off. But also I was investing at the same time, right? So I paid the bill, but I also invested. And for those of you who have kids, if you haven't started with a 529 plan, hello, call somebody tomorrow. Because you'd be surprised how fast a 529 plan will compound. If you had a baby in January and you started with a 529 plan, you know how much money you would have made this summer? If you had just put $1,000 in it. And oh, by the way, a 529, they'll take $25 a paycheck. That used to be our old layaway. Anybody a boomer? Layaway, $25. You will be shocked how fast that compounds. And by the time your child has graduated from high school, there's some money there. You're not sitting there wishing, or you're not sitting there thinking about, you know, that emergency that came up. Because the beauty of a 529 plan is it's not easy to go back and get that money out. You know, you put some money in a credit union, you put some money in a CD, you know you can go touch that. You know, but a 529 is almost like putting it in a mutual fund. You can't get that easily. But now you have some money away for your child to go to school. And you're not looking at your shoes when you have an A+ student who deserves to go to college but can't go.
I can't help but think, how do you help us, or how do we become a little more disciplined and a little bit more future thinking? Because you say it, you know, it makes sense to all of us, but we have that instant gratification, and we want it now. And, you know, we didn't have a household with parents who taught us how to be patient and let it compound over time. Like in our world, that's a hard thing to do in our community. So how do you, what simple advice maybe?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, and this is something I obviously don't say as much in mixed audiences, but you also have to be the steward of your own report card. Right. We are still too caught up in what somebody else is going to say about what we have or what we don't have. And when I started looking at people's habits, I started looking at people, obviously, that did not come from our community. And while my father, God rest him, I love him, he just had to have a Cadillac. You know, the boys that were on the other side of the town was driving a Toyota, right? And if you don't have Cadillac money, then why are you driving a Cadillac? Exactly. Right? Who are we doing this for? Right? And if it makes you feel good, I have no argument with that. But you got to understand the choice that you're making. You're driving a $120,000 Mercedes. That is your choice. But you have $5,000 worth of emergency money in the bank. You know, you're not going to work forever. If you're in your 50s, do you have enough money to really travel the way you want to travel when you get to be 60 or 65? It's not that far off. Do you have some money to build another house, wherever it is you might want to build a house? Can you really enjoy the next 20 years of your life after you've been laboring for 40 of them? Right? So you worked hard and you have no ability to enjoy that? Well, I hope that car feels good. I'm not raining on your parade, but please understand, the only person that matters to really is you.
So, you have books that you've written. Share with the audience 2 or 3 key points that maybe you haven't touched on that you think would be worthwhile for our audience. And then after that, I'm going to ask you a lightning round question.
Okay. All right. This really is the only one that I really like to share is the difference between performance currency and relationship currency. And that's in the new book, Strategize to Win. And this one I really did write with us in mind. Performance currency is the currency that is generated by your delivering that which was asked of you. Every time that you perform on an assignment above people's expectations, you generate performance currency. It works just like the stock market. Anytime a company says to the street that they will deliver 25 cents a share, and that company delivers 40 cents a share, that stock goes up every single time, and so will yours. Performance currency is valuable for 3 reasons. Number 1, early in your career or early on in any new environment, it will get you noticed. It will create a reputation for you. Number 2, it will get you paid early on in your career, early on in any new environment. And number 3, it will even get you a sponsor. And a sponsor is the person that's carrying your paper into the room. This is the person that behind closed doors will argue passionately on your behalf that you should get the bonus, you should get the next great opportunity, that you should get the promotion. Make no mistake, that person is spending their valuable political and social capital on you. But here's the problem with performance currency. Performance currency starts to experience diminishing marginal returns over time. In the beginning, it's worth about $1.50. But over time, that $1.50 works its way down to $1. Why? Because now you have established a new standard of excellence. Everybody knows that you will do a great job. Everybody expects that you will deliver. So there's no longer a premium associated with your deliverable. The currency that's now most important is the relationship currency. And relationship currency is worth about $2.25. And it never experiences any diminishing marginal returns. Relationship currency is the currency that is generated by the investments that you make in the people in your environment. The investments that you make in the people in your environment. None of us work in a silo. We're all working in highly interdependent environments. So at a minimum, you must have a relationship with every seat that touches your seat. If the only person that knows that you're doing a great job is your boss, then your ability to ascend is going to be vulnerable. Why? That person may leave the organization. They may lose their seat at the decision-making table, or they may lose their juice. So it's your job to make sure as many people as possible in the organization is aware of your outsized contribution. Here's why relationship currency is so important. Your ability to ascend in any environment will be a function of somebody's judgment. Judgment about whether or not you're ready. Judgment about whether or not the team will follow you, and judgment about whether or not you will ultimately be successful. And ladies and gentlemen, judgments are directly influenced by relationships. And if you're not with me yet, let me give you my last piece of evidence. Everybody in this room has power. Hard-earned, personal, influential currency. But I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, how many people in this room will use their hard-earned, personal, influential currency on somebody that they do not know? That's right. Maybe one or two. So remind yourself that your inability to ascend will rarely, if ever, be a function of whether or not somebody likes you. Right. But it absolutely will be a function of whether or not somebody knows you. That's right. While your performance currency may get your name on the short list that's being discussed behind closed doors, when your name is called, if nobody in that room can speak on your behalf, they simply go to the next name on the list. And it has absolutely nothing to do with your ability to do the job, but everything to do with whether or not somebody knows you well enough to say, oh, Kevin, great guy. Oh, Michelle, great pair of hands. She'll walk through walls. If no one can make those kinds of comments, they just go to the next name. So it's imperative that you build relationships in your environment.
I feel like we got some insider trading information. That's in the secret book. Okay, I'm gonna do a lightning round. We're gonna take 2 questions, go next door. We got that, we good on that? Okay. All right, you ready? Lightning round. I gotta ask you one other question. Can I ask you one more question real quick? Okay, this is like a personal question, so if you don't want to answer, well, some parties they know what I ask you, but you sit on the
No, you always have a choice. I can say no.
Okay. How you get there?
Marla now.
So, you sit on a couple boards, and I think a lot of us don't understand that space that well. But like, we normally sit on a nonprofit board, or this board, they're not paid boards. Y'all follow me so far?
Yeah, sure.
So to be able to sit on a board of a company that you've heard of, like Walmart, Wells Fargo, whatever. Very few people ever get to do that. And even fewer people of color get to do that.
That's right.
And then if you're a woman, on top of that, it's just getting more narrow and more narrow. And when you get on the board, they actually pay you to go to those board meetings.
Right.
No, not buy you a cup of coffee. Not performance currency where they're gonna buy you a cup of coffee. I'm talking about like they pay you for real. So can you share just whatever you feel comfortable sharing? Maybe tell them what board you're on.
Yes.
And then,
As you said, I started off, and I still am on a lot of nonprofit boards, but June of last year, I was elected to the Walmart Corporation board. He makes an excellent point. It is important for us to be represented on those boards, especially boards where there's a lot of people of color who are in the core constituents, because you do have a perspective that can be important to how they're making decisions. We all have seen the brand crisis with some names that I will mention from this stage when there's not the right people in the room when the decisions are being made, and then there's a commercial or there's something else that happens, and then there's a brand crisis. And I'll tell you, I actually, again, for full disclosure, I'm always a bull. I can always find a glass half full. I am a glass half full kind of girl. But here's where I think it's going to be beneficial to us, because social media has created another power, if you will, that brands have to be responsive to. And I think that that's going to help us a lot with respect to getting in the room, because they're going to need to have that perspective. Because social media has turned out to be something that these companies feel like they have to take care of. The shareholders, yes. The employees, yes. Right? But at the end of the day, and the customers, yes. But the customers are now people that they can hear from directly in a way that we couldn't communicate before. So I actually think that's going to bode well. And he's right. To be on a corporate board, it is significant. You know, most boards do pay you somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 figures, 1, 2, or 3 handle on it. It all depends.
Wait.
So it's significant.
6 figures. And you said something about handles.
Yeah, that means it could be 100,000, it could be 200, it could be 3.
Those are handles?
Those are handles. That's what I call it. Right. So it all depends, and all of that's public information. You can look in any company's filing and see exactly what they pay their board. So,
hurry up. Okay, y'all see that. So she on a board, and not just Carla, but people on board, they literally, how many board meetings you have?
oh, it's a lot of work. There's 4 specific ones, but then there are committees, just like they are in your nonprofit environment. Then there are committee meetings that are in between that. So you could easily have up to 12 touches, and don't let there be a crisis. That could be all weekend, all night, right? It all depends.
You know that sounds kind of crazy.
No, I mean, but think about it.
Let me go for a
Okay.
second. You said a lot of handles. 1, 2, and 3. You said it's a lot of work. We got 12 meetings in a weekend. You figured it out yet?
Average base pay, 137,000. Average additional pay, 35,000.
So that means if you work on a Walmart, this is all public information. We're not asking her to say anything. But you're making a handle and a half. for 4 meetings, a couple committees, and a weekend. Now, in all seriousness, it's for real hard work.
It's real hard.
But the point is to have somebody like this to influence these companies and the products they make and the decisions they make in the workplace. We normally not represented there. And this is a big deal. And if you ever are lucky enough to get there, they actually compensate you. And they fly you. No. I'm sorry, I'm getting ghetto. They will, do they not fly folks? So that's not the kind where you go wait in line. You hope you got a pre-check with the TSA guy and you ain't got your ID. That's not. This time they take you to the runway, and then you just walk up the steps like Trump and Melania. I'm sorry, Obama and. But my point is, this sister is a real deal.
But I will tell you that, in all seriousness, and the way you broke down the math, that was pretty funny. But you got to think about the gravity of what it means also to be on the corporate board, because some of these companies are 100-year-old companies. Some may have just started in the last 10 years. But there's, in some cases, thousands of people that you may never see that is depending on your good judgment and depending on your work and all the work that you have to do. This is not, I would not even think about doing it just from a compensation standpoint, because in many ways it's a lot of responsibility and far bigger than what you might even be facing in what your normal W-2 is, right? So, and that one second point that I want to make is that it is a march there. So you do have to make sure that you are comporting yourself throughout your career where you're going to be somebody that they want to talk to, which means putting points on the board in whatever your job has been, whether it's the mayor job, whether it's working for a company, but trying to put some real points on the board because they are looking for folks that they think will be able to contribute around that table and have a perspective on what's going on with their company. So we're teasing about it, but it's hard to get on one of those boards. So I wanted you to be able to understand what it needs to prepare yourself so that you are somebody that they're looking for when you get to that point in your career.
Okay, lightning round, you ready? Favorite food?
Oh, hamburgers.
What book is on your bedside or bedside table or something you read recently?
Oh, the Bible.
3 artists in your playlist.
Aretha Franklin, Gladys Knight, and Luther Vandross.
LeBron James or Steph Curry?
Oh, that's tough. They both are fabulous. I won't make a distinction.
Olivia Pope or Cookie Lyons?
Olivia Pope.
All right.
I know the original Judy Smith, from which Olivia Pope was born, and she's a bad girl.
If they made a movie about your life, who would you want to play?
Angela Bassett.
What animal do you most identify with?
Oh, the lion. I'm a Delta, I should say elephant.
This last one you don't have to do if you don't want to. But you sung. Would you share any note or any something or?
So, because I'm a gospel singer, I like the choir, right? So let's do a little call and response. The song is "Expect to Win." It's number 10 off my last album, Unceasing Praise. It was written by SWAT, Singers with a Testimony, from Brown Memorial Baptist Church in Brooklyn. They heard me speak on Expect to Win. They wrote the song, showed up at my office, so I said I'll record it. So we're gonna do the chorus. I'll do one line, you do a line, all right? Okay. Expect to win. Expect to win. No matter what you're up against. No matter what you're up against. Don't give up, don't give in. Don't give up, don't give in. Oh yes, you can. Oh yes, you can. Not fear but faith. Not fear but faith. We'll win the race. We'll win the race. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give in. Don't give in. Expect to win. Expect to win.
Come on, King of the Peace, you want to give it to Carla? It says, cousins, the absence of economic equality for us is simply on layaway. Can we see what we see? Can you wake up? Powerful economic peace. Let's give it up for Carla.